You go into a doctor and the doctor says, it's going to be, I don't know, $5,000 for your surgery or for your procedure. Your insurance policy will have a clause in there that says, well, you know, the first $2,500 of that you're responsible for, and then we'll cover the other half, right? Because the deductible may be that high. People's voice. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. It is greatly appreciated. As always, if the podcast is informative and is providing you with great information, please do share that information. Subscribe to the podcast if you have not as yet. To those who are listening to the podcast for the first time, thank you. And also, please share and like the podcast. Tell somebody to tell somebody to tell somebody is what we say here at the People's Voice. So today, I want to talk about debt. And not just any debt, because obviously in the news, there's been a ton of conversation regarding student loans, and we even covered it here on a previous, we touched on it a little bit on a previous episode of the People's Voice, but debt in the United States is out of control, right? Make no mistake about it. Everyone is dealing with some form of debt. Now that's a pretty wide range comment, but it's not uncommon for people to have debt. And many people know how to manage that debt, or at least keep it to a minimum for the most part. But the debt I want to talk about today is medical debt. And I think because that particular conversation, in my opinion, does not get brought up to the surface enough. Because like I said just previously, a lot of the conversation is always around student loan debt and credit card debt, even home mortgage debt. But medical debt, I don't think gets the light that it needs to. And so I want to talk about that today. I was reading through an article from CNBC, and this article was from just a couple of months ago. And the headline says 100 million adults have healthcare debt. That's literally a third of the population, right? Almost a third of the population. The United States has over 330 million, or probably 340 million now, people, or plus 340 million plus people in its country, and over 100 million adults have healthcare debt. So I saw this headline and I was like, wow, that's not necessarily surprising, but at the same time, it is, kind of a shock. Like, well, why do so many people have medical debt, especially since the healthcare reform and the Healthcare Act that was passed by former President Obama, better known as Obamacare, which gave so many people, or I should say gave many people access to healthcare, which, or healthcare insurance, I should say, which was a struggle prior to the Healthcare Reform Act going into place. So today I want to talk about medical debt, some of the causes of medical debt, who is most affected by it, and then, of course, always provide some solutions and recommendations on how to manage that if you find yourself in this predicament. So, again, 100 million adults have healthcare debt. Now, healthcare debt, just like any other debt, there's a range that is analyzed, or a range that is reported in terms of healthcare debt. So, healthcare debt can be something as small as $250, right? You go to a dentist or just a regular doctor, and if there's either maybe a copay, several copays that you didn't pay, even though most doctors ask for that up front, or there's a deductible that you can't meet threshold, or you go into a medical facility and your insurance only covers it up to a certain point. Well, if you don't have the financial resources to deal with that, now you have debt, right? And medical debt is very particular because oftentimes, especially if you're dealing with a medical emergency, this is not something that you have planned for, right? I mean, you can be the best of the best planners regarding your life and, properly managing and budgeting your money. But if you are suddenly blindsided with a medical issue, especially one that, requires you to go into a healthcare facility or requires emergency services, then that can be very expensive. So, one of the first causes, if we're going to start there, is that when it comes to medical debt, one of the ways that it's incurred or acquired is because an individual is dealing with a medical issue that they did not expect. I was reading a article here on NPR, and NPR did a piece on this actually this past summer. And what they did was they talked to various individuals regarding their debt. And it was, across a span of people. And the interesting thing about it was, number one, the ranges were from like $1,400, $131, all the way up to, $350,000. But there was always a similar pattern in that. And for the most part, each of those individuals, it was unexpected, right? It was a medical expense that was not expected. And now they are required to pay this money back. So, in terms of the first cause of most medical debt, unexpected medical requirement. One of the second issue regarding a lot of medical debt is that, as I stated earlier, with the Reform Act that was done, the Healthcare Reform Act that was passed by President Obama a few terms ago, even though it provided more access to healthcare for many individuals, or I should say healthcare insurance, those insurance policies oftentimes come with very high deductibles, right? So, if you have insurance and you want to utilize that insurance for your, for your medical issue, or for your health issue that comes up, there's a deductible. And I guess I should give a definition for deductible. I don't want to assume that everyone knows what a deductible is, but a deductible basically is a specified amount of money that you, as the insured person, you have to pay before the insurance company will pay your claim, as so to speak, or pay your health benefit. So You go into a doctor and the doctor says, it's going to be, I don't know, $5,000 for your surgery or for your procedure. Your insurance policy will have a clause in there that says, well, you know, the first $2,500 of that you're responsible for, and then we'll cover the other half, right? Because the deductible may be that high. And with a lot of these policies, you often see that, especially if you are trying to save money. And many times when individuals are trying to save money, they'll take the insurance policy that has the higher deductible, but then provides them with a low monthly payment. And then in that fact, that allows them to, retain healthcare insurance, but, still not have to incur high monthly rates to maintain that health insurance. So the second reason why some people end up going into medical debt is because of the coverage or the deductible that they have for their insurance rate. Now, for their insurance coverage. Now, it varies obviously depending on who your carrier is in terms of your insurance carrier and things of that nature. So, you know, before getting into the recommendations, obviously you want to read through your policy to ensure that whatever your deductible is, that it can support any potential issues coming down the line, in terms of your out of pocket expenses. So, that's something that you definitely want to look at as well. One of the third challenges, which kind of goes back to the first challenge, is just your overall health, right? Obviously, again, some medical issues that come up we can't prevent, right? It's, as you go through the experiences of life, you may encounter, various sicknesses or ailments that just unfortunately you deal with. But trying to be proactive about your health, right? That's trying to maintain consistency in terms of exercising and eating right and things of that nature, no smoking, and you've all heard it before. That goes a long way because, it's not brain surgery or anything, but the more that you incur or the more that you put on your body, in terms of poor diet and poor habits, eventually that will take a toll on you. Make no mistake about it. So the third issue is just maintaining your health, right? Those who have poor health habits or poor diet and things of that nature tend to deal with medical, or I should say, incur medical costs at a much higher rate, because now it's not only just being treated or being diagnosed with the issue. Now you have to be treated, which requires follow up, regular follow up, which can get very costly, and then also can lead to you as an individual not having the proper amount of money to support that or to cover those issues, which then leads many people into medical debt. So reading here, one of the points that was made in this article, again, I'm referring back to an article on CNBC, which was entitled 100 Million Adults Have Healthcare. I'm so sorry, healthcare debt. It did note that out of that 100 million, now this is where it gets very interesting. Out of that 100 million adults, 12% of them owe $10,000 or more, right? So you're talking roughly, 10 to 12 million people owe more than $10,000 in medical debt. And um, when you start to get into those type of numbers in terms of debt, paying it back becomes very, very challenging, right? And especially because the average income for a household, I think it was somewhere between, it was either 65 or 90,000. I have to fact check myself on that one. But when you're starting to talk about those type of debts on top of your daily living expenses and things of that nature, it can get very challenging for families, especially for those who are obviously not prepared to deal with that type of debt. So, almost 10 million people, that's a lot of individuals that have incurred $10,000 or more in debt. That's a lot of debt to deal with. Reading here from the article, it states here, 63% says, giving an example. For instance, 63% with current or recent debt said it caused them to cut back on spending, clothing, and other basics. Now, again, you're talking about individuals that has $10,000 or more in medical debt. Now you have to manage that debt on top of just your basic living, like I was saying before. And in this study that was conducted here by Kaiser, they say 63% of individuals with medical debt said they had to cut back on some of the basics for just your day to day. So it really creates a tremendous amount of pressure on a household. And out of that 63%, it even goes on to say that 51% of those that have an annual income of $90,000 or more, they even say that they had to use up part or all of their savings just to deal with this medical debt. So, the debt really takes a toll on the overall operation of a family's home. I mean, it can be very, very debilitating. I'm just reading through the stats here because it goes through some great stats that I think lends to the conversation. And again, my point for bringing this up is because I want to be able to shed light on this because, again, there's been so much conversation surrounding student debt and credit card debt and home mortgage debt, but nobody really talks about medical debt, which is really, in terms of bankruptcy, one of the number one reasons I believe that individuals are filing for bankruptcy in the United States. It's medical debt because medical cost in the United States, as we all know, is out of control. So another point that was made here in this article, and then I'm going to move on, but it says that a lot of the individuals that are dealing with this type of debt, some of them just don't even deal with their past due bills. They just don't have the ability to pay. Some have gone to a payment plan to try to pay them. Many of them have used credit cards, and I'm going to talk about that here when I give my recommendations. And then many have also borrowed from family and friends. So, that debt that is being taken on because of these medical issues just doesn't just stop with the individual or the family. It can extend to, other relationships, including family and friends. So it can really take a toll. Not to mention that many people have tried to take on extra work, which can then lead to even more health problems because you're dealing with the stresses of trying to manage, multiple jobs and things of that nature, and scheduling, change living situations. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Now, initially going back, so as I mentioned, one of the common problems is that a lot of the debt that is incurred is a result of, um, I don't want to call it inadequate healthcare insurance, but it's healthcare insurance that maybe doesn't cover all of the necessary needs that an individual will eventually experience. And again, it's tough to do that when you're dealing with medical issues, because you might take out an insurance plan thinking, well, I'm okay today, but that has nothing to do with, what might happen next year or next month. So, excuse me. So a lot of times those fees that come up, like the lab fees and the doctor visits and the emergency care, your insurance, and a lot of individuals take employer sponsored healthcare insurance, right? So they're putting something in front of you and saying, well, you get this, this, and this. Every month we'll take out this, this, and this. And sometimes you go with the cheaper plan. And I don't want to victimize anyone for doing that, because listen, we've all done it, but many times those plans don't cover the necessary needs of the individual at the time when the issue occurs, and then they incur a lot of debt. So some of the most common types of debt, medical debt or healthcare debt that they're calling it, first of all, lab fees and diagnostic fees. You're getting blood work, you're getting urine samples, things of that nature. Really go through your insurance plan to make sure that those are covered, or at least covered up to a high percentage, so the out-of-pocket costs are not as exuberant. Doctor visits, we all know about those co-payments. Again, check with your insurance provider to see what those co-payments are each time that you visit. Emergency care, I mean, the ride in the ambulance, if you ever have to take one, is one of the most expensive rides you will ever take. Okay, and a lot of times that coverage is not covered greatly by your insurance. So do your research in terms of emergency care, especially emergency room services. Look at that. And I'm only going to do here the top four. So lab fees, doctor visits, emergency care, and then the fourth highest cost or cause for medical debt is dental care. And dental care, your teeth are so important, just beyond the aesthetics of everyone having a beautiful smile and things of that nature. Your teeth are very expensive, okay? And if you don't take care of them, dental insurance is nowhere near as robust as standard medical insurance. And a lot of people go into debt for dental care. Keep that in mind. That's very important. So those are some of the top four debts that are occurred from a medical standpoint, because of inadequate insurance or out-of-pocket costs that individuals cannot pay. What I wanted to do here is to play a clip, and this is from CBS Mornings, and they interviewed a family that had two twins. They had twin sons, and when they had their twin sons, unfortunately, when they were born with cerebral palsy and other issues that required the two twins that were born, to stay in the hospital for an extended amount of time. Well, because of that, this couple basically incurred over $80,000 of medical debt because of this. So I kind of wanted to play this as an example of what happens when medical emergencies occur, and then the result of debt that can be calculated or accumulated as a result of healthcare insurance not being able to cover all of your needs, and then out-of-pocket costs are required. So take a listen to this.
What went through your mind?
It was a lot of panic, and it was a lot of like, do we file for bankruptcy? Do we, like, they can't repossess a child, so I guess I get to keep them. But
Right.
what do I do now?
Allie Ward says the stress blocked some of the joy surrounding the twins' birth.
Instead of being able to be present in the experience of being a new mom and a new family, a lot of times it was, oh my gosh, like, how are we going to make this work?
The couple used all their savings, maxed out their credit cards, and wiped out their retirement accounts, and still it wasn't enough.
You still wound up with debt that you're still paying on.
Yeah.
Does that make you mad?
Yeah. Yes. Matter about the fact that, like, what about people who don't have all the benefits that we had in the situation?
And I would be mad too, especially when you're dealing with a situation where you're birthing your children and you don't have you obviously don't have the foresight to foresee that this type of issue will occur with in terms of the birth of the children, and now you're dealing with cost starting your family, and now you're dealing with an additional cost on top of that. That's very difficult to deal with. But this is not an isolated incident, right? These are common cases and causes for medical debt to be incurred. So I just wanted to play that as an example, or just one example of what happens when medical debt is incurred. So now, as always, we've talked about all of the issues and some of the causes. What I want to do now is talk about the ways that we can keep this, keep medical debt down, or minimize it, or keep it manageable so it does not go into, or we as individuals don't go into debt. So, and this is from the consumerfinance.gov site. They've put together a checklist of things that you may want to do to ensure that medical debt does not become overbearing, can be manageable, and in many cases that you have the necessary resources to pay it off as soon as possible, or at least be able to manage it so it doesn't detract from your day-to-day life. So one of the first things they recommend is to review the medical bills carefully, because many times, and this is just recommendation for any invoice or bill that you incur, you should always research and review it, because there might be some procedures on there or some tests on there that you didn't need, or was not required, or maybe were not even done, but they might be listed on there. And so you want to go through that bill to make sure that every item that's on there is something that either A, you were treated for, or B, your insurance company will pay. Because if your insurance company won't pay and you weren't treated, if you were not treated or provided that treatment, then you shouldn't have to pay. You should need to get a revised invoice. But then you also want to see if there's anything on there that's being disputed by your insurance company, so you can follow up with them to get that paid. It says here, some providers who bill you directly may have been associated with a hospital where you were treated, so you may not have known you were receiving services from them at the time that you were being treated. So you want to do a review of the bill to make sure that everything on there is as stated, or I should say as complementary to the treatment that you received when you were at the medical facility. The second thing you want to do is you want to get documentation, right? So this kind of supports the first point. You want to go through to make sure that all of your documentation is matching up to the invoice. Length of stay, reason you were there, doctor recommendations, everything. So get your documentations together. So when if in the event you need to dispute anything, you have everything together, makes the process go through much smoother, quicker, and then you can get a resolve in terms of reducing that debt as soon as possible. Talked about this. Check with your healthcare provider once you get your documentations together. Check with your insurance provider, to make sure that whatever is being documented in there is being paid by the insurance company, or they must submit a reason why or highlight something in the policy to why it's not being paid. So you definitely want to do that. Check with your insurance company. So the first three was review your medical bill, get documentation, check with your insurance company. And then kind of the fourth one I just said, you want to do it as soon as possible. Don't let the bill, you get a bill in the mail, dispute it immediately. Don't let it sit and I'm not going to deal with it right now, because not only will that bill keep coming, but many times interest is placed on those fees, and then it can get out of hand. And then by the time that you decide to deal with it, it might be, well, why didn't you come to us as soon as you saw it? And now you're dealing with that headache. So deal with it and try to resolve it as quick as possible. Now, here's something that many people may not know. After you get that bill, let's say everything is correct. Insurance company says that we're not covering that, or we don't cover that. You got to go back to your healthcare facility where you had the treatment. You can request to negotiate the bill with the hospital, healthcare facility, or the dental facility. Now, sometimes, depending on the case, and this is a case-by-case basis, this is not throughout. So again, let me stop here and say this is not legal advice, right? Everything here is for information and consumption. I am not a lawyer, but what I'm saying to you is that you do have the ability to try to ask if you can negotiate that rate down. Now, not saying it's going to happen. They might say, no, we don't do that here. You have to go back to your insurance company. But if you can ask, then you can see what can be possibly can be done. In many cases, the hospital may be willing to put you on a payment plan, and that payment plan will allow you to pay off that debt at a much slower rate instead of dealing with a very large bill to deal with. So contact your hospital or healthcare facility to see if you can negotiate or be put on a payment plan. You can also ask for financial support. This is kind of goes back to what I just said in terms of the negotiation. Sometimes depending on what your ailments are, you could be approved for what they call financial assistance for charity care if you're unable to pay your bill. But again, you need to check with the hospital or the health care facility to see if that's a possibility. The last one, which I think is probably the most important one, which people do all the time, I think you even heard it in that piece that I played. A lot of times when you've gotten to the point where you just want to get the bill paid, many people end up putting the medical cost on a credit card. Do not put your medical costs on a credit card, because one of the other things that was noted in that CNBC piece is that a lot of times, even though they've stated well over 100 million adults have medical debt, it could be that number is probably much higher, because a lot of times individuals pay the medical debt off with a credit card, and now the credit card is maxed out with the medical debt. And now it really gets crazy, because you're dealing many times with a high interest credit card, and that can balloon, which can cause you to default, have your credit card, closed out, charged off onto your credit onto your credit account or your credit check, and now you're labeled as having bad credit. So it says here, if you can't immediately pay off that debt on your credit card, and ask your medical provider for a payment plan with little or no interest. Now, again, the hospital or the medical or the healthcare provider has a little bit more leeway when it comes to dealing with medical debt. Now, this is not all healthcare facilities, because I know people may be listening and saying, well, they sent it to collections or they have this person. And yes, that's true too. So that's why you want to deal with it as soon as possible, to see if you can negotiate those bills and those charges with the healthcare facility. That way you have a better chance of managing it, as opposed to putting it on a credit card or getting a personal loan and then not being able to pay that off and then run the possibility of defaulting. So those are the 7 recommendations that were provided by the Consumer Finance, consumerfinance.gov, about how to deal with or to ensure that you're keeping the medical debt in place. The Consumer Advisory Department of the government. That's my time for today. Again, I just wanted to bring this to the forefront because medical debt, again, is out of control, and I don't think it gets enough light shined on it. So hopefully this was informative, and some recommendations here that we provided can be put to use to help alleviate anyone who's dealing with this challenge right now, because many people are and will be in the future. So the best way to deal with anything is to be as prepared as possible. So again, if this information was helpful, please share the information. You can reach me on my socials at I am Trey Evans, or also at I am Trey Evans on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Trey Evans, the website, or you can go to the Instagram at Trey Be Talking on Instagram. But again, I really want this information to get out there, so do share this information as much as you can. That's what the whole purpose of the platform is for. So, as always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the people's voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute. The people's voice.